Good morning, everybody. It's Friday morning. And, yesterday as we were talking about the Holy Spirit, we mentioned about John 14:26, where Jesus made a promise to the disciples, where he said that, the Spirit is coming, and he said he is not only with you, but Jesus said he will be in you. Well, today I want us to look at Acts chapter 2, when that promise was fulfilled. But before we do that, I want to mention that what Jesus said in John 14:26 is also related to what the prophet Ezekiel said in the 36th chapter of Ezekiel, really in verses 26 and 27. Because one of the things that Ezekiel prophesied was a future day when he said specifically, he says, I will put a new spirit in you. And then in the very next verse, he said, I will put my spirit in you. So what Jesus was saying was really a prophecy of Ezekiel, and it was going to come about. Now, in Acts chapter 2, then, we are seeing that promise of Ezekiel and Jesus coming to fulfillment on that day of Pentecost. Everything that had been prophesied. Now, in Acts 1 and verse 5, Jesus was talking to the apostles after his resurrection and just before his ascension. And one of the things that he promises them there, just before the events of the day of Pentecost, he says, in a few days, you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit. So he's telling them that the promise of Ezekiel, the promise that I made to you before the crucifixion and the resurrection, he says it's about to happen, okay? So it's obvious here that God is about to do something new. Now, the Old Testament said, it prophesied that God was going to do something new. And that's what's happening here in Acts chapter 2. Now, if God is doing something new, he wants to announce it. He wants to make it clear. If there's a new product on TV, the manufacturers want to get that out in front of people. Well, that's what God is doing on the day of Pentecost. And he really is making three statements about this new age, the new covenant, the coming of the Spirit of God. And he does this, first of all, by it says that there were tongues of fire that came to rest on men. And this idea of fire coming down from heaven is really a common image throughout the Old Testament. When you look at the Old Testament, and when God called Moses, he used a burning bush that burned with fire and kept burning. We see that later on, when Israel was wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, God made his presence known to them by a pillar of fire that accompanied them on their journeys. When Solomon dedicated the temple in 2 Chronicles 7 and verse 1, after the dedication, it says a fire fell from heaven at that point, and God inhabited that temple. The other thing that we see is even in the later on in the Old Testament, we see Elijah in 1 Kings 18, where God wanted to make it clear that Elijah is my prophet and I am the God of the universe. And so God sent a fire from heaven on that sacrifice that Elijah had prepared. So God was making a statement, and he was using fire again, once more, to announce something big is about to happen. Now, one of the things that we also see there in terms of the symbol is we see that in Acts 2 it says that there was the sound of a mighty wind. Now, we mentioned before that in Genesis 1:2 that it says the Spirit of God moved over the face of the deep. And that word in the Hebrew, we mentioned, I think it was on Monday, that spirit, or the word for spirit, can also be translated as wind. And that word for wind can also be translated as breath. So it's a very flexible word with multiple meanings. And so this idea of the wind coming on the day of Pentecost is a picture that just as God was moving with the wind of the Spirit at creation. Now he's moving with the wind of the Spirit at the recreation of man, the regeneration of man. So these are rich symbols that happen on that day of Pentecost. But there's a third image that we see in this passage. It says that those who were present on the day of Pentecost spoke in languages, and that the languages were understood. Now, that also takes us back to an Old Testament picture. Way back in Genesis chapter 11, at the Tower of Babel, you remember when man was getting too big for his britches, building a temple, said, I'm going to build a temple to God. And when that happened, God confused the languages of those people, and it said he scattered them over the face of the earth. Well, now God is using languages that are now understood to symbolize that he is bringing the world back together to worship him, and he's bringing all people to him, and he's uniting all these languages of the world here on this day of Pentecost. So when we look at Acts chapter 2, we are seeing a lot of rich symbolism that is there. Now, if God went to all that trouble on the day of Pentecost to fulfill his promise that was given through Ezekiel and also through Jesus, it means that this ministry of the Spirit is important in your life as well. So open your heart, open your mind, and allow the Spirit of God to do his work within you. Anyway, have a good weekend. Bye for now. God bless.